All right. In the example right here, what they're going to talk about is the ability to get information from more than one table. All right. This looks really, really ugly. So I am going to select it. I'm going to copy it to the clipboard. I'm going to jump back. So I'm getting out of my share and going back, hopefully, to the other share where I've got someplace in here. Tell you what I'm going to do. I've got so much stuff open. I'm going to close a few things. So give me a second. No, I'm not trying to jump there. That's where I was. Well, it's not allowing me to go back to where we just were. That's what I want to go to. So well, I wanted to show you a faster way to write it than what they're showing in the book, but I'll have to send it to you or whatever. Okay. Am I right? You can all see, I just putting the blue around this. You can all see that, correct? All right. So let me just tell you that everywhere they've got invoice line items, etc., almost every case, these are two different tables. There's invoice line items, there's invoice line items, there's invoice line items, etc., and there's some products stuff here. All right. Almost all the time, you don't need to say invoice line items dot. What they have written right here, this is the first time you've seen a fairly complex query. And it's called an inner join query, which says I want to grab information from both tables where the product codes match. All right. So what it's saying is look through both the invoice line item table and look through the product table. And where they've got a product code that is 46, so that's the customer number, give me their invoice ID, their product code, their description, their unit price, and their quantity. So this is what you get. But since the information existed in two different tables, we had to do what was called a database join to combine that information. Now, not to confuse you even more, but there's inner joins, there's non-inner joins, there's outer joins, there's left joins, and there's right joins. You're going to see some examples of these as we go on, but don't worry about it for right now. All right. What I want you to understand is we went to the invoice line items table and got this. We went to the invoice line items table and got this. We went to the products table and got this. We went to the invoice line items table and got this. And we went to the invoice line items table and got this. If we did not put that where in there, it would have given us the invoice ID, product code, description, unit price, and quantity for everyone in the database. All right. And again, I'm not even going to ask if that totally makes sense. It might make very little sense. But as they mentioned, a join allows you to combine data from two or more tables into a single result set. The most common type of join is an inner join where both things have to match. So only give it to me when the product code and the line items and the product code and the products is 46. Now, as I mentioned to you before, you can add things into tables. You can update things that are in tables, and you can delete things that are in tables. When you insert things into a table, typically what you do is you say the word insert, the word into. These are both keywords. What table you want to insert into. Then in parentheses, a list of all of the different fields that are in there, and the word values, then another parenthesized list where CS15 is the product code, Muroc C# 2015 is the description, 5650 is the unit price, and 3000 is the on-hand quantity. At least conceptually, again, does that make sense?
Yeah.
All right. Then we've got an update. This says update the products table, set the unit price equal to $54 where the product code is equal to MMCP. So here's the product code for this one. Here's the product code for that one. Can you guess? And if you take a guess, and if you're wrong, no big deal. If I put in this, see what's in blue right there? Can you see that? What if I put in just that and I didn't put the where in? What do you think would happen?
Return all products.
It would, you're on the right track. It would set the unit price for every product, regardless of the code, to $54. See, when you're up, almost always when you do an update, you put a where clause in there. Let's suppose that I worked for a company and they decided that in the company I worked for, everybody in accounting is going to get a 10% raise. So I would say something like update employee, set salary equal to salary times 1.1, where department name equals accounting, or where department number equals 1, something like that. If I don't put the where in there, guess what happens? Everybody gets a 10% raise. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
In the same way, when you do a delete, this says I want to delete this record, the record from the customers table for customer 558. Maybe they went out of business. Maybe they decided they're going with somebody else. It doesn't matter. But if I don't put the where clause in there, it deletes every customer. Almost certainly not what I want. So these commands that you're seeing in here, the insert, the update, and the delete, these are 3 examples of data manipulation language commands. The other one is the select we already looked at. So select, insert, update, and delete. When you do all that stuff, you may or may not have heard the term CRUD, C-R-U-D. But a lot of applications that are created today are CRUD applications. CRUD is create, which means insert, read, which means select, the U for update, and the D for delete. All right. When you insert or when you delete, you can add more than 1 row. You can update or delete more than 1 row. All right. But you almost always with both an update and a delete have a where clause. It makes no sense to put a where clause in an insert statement. That makes no sense. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to attempt now before the end of this, and that is to go over this stuff that's in here. We're going to hit this in later chapters, so don't worry about it if it doesn't make a boatload of sense. This more or less is how the hardware and the software are kind of communicating with one another. So I already told you what ActiveX data objects were. It's no big thing. All right. But .NET provides a lot of stuff so that you're able to work with databases. In fact, as the old saying goes, you get a lot of stuff right out of the box. All right. So let's look at what some of that stuff is. You're going to work with in here some of this stuff. So you're going to work with what's called a connection object. which connects you to the database. All right. It either establishes a connection or you can use it to help get rid of a connection. All right. You're going to write commands. Now, what we just saw back here, these are examples of SQL. That's an insert command. That's an SQL update command. That's an SQL delete command. You're going to write commands, but when you write those commands to execute against the database, you can either write them what you're going to see on Wednesday, where we're going to actually create a database as a class, and we're going to start writing some of these, or you can set it up. So for instance, let's say that I had these fields: product code, product description, unit price, and on-hand quantity. Wouldn't it make a lot of sense for me to create a form that had 4 different labels: product code, description, unit price, and quantity, and 4 different text boxes? So if I put these 4 things in and I clicked an add button, it would add them to the database. That's what we're going to end up doing. All right. So we're going to be able to, I'm going to show you how to add to a database both directly into the database and how to do it through C#. When you're working with a database, you can also use data readers and data adapters. Data readers are read-only. All right. So if I want to be able to see a list of all of my students, let's say, I can put them in a data reader. I can't change them then, but I can look at them. A data adapter, as it says, it provides a link between our commands and the database. Okay. Now, what's here, the only one that we really have to concentrate on, that we really have to know about here, are the ones that start with, is just the first one. system.data.sql client. OLEDB, that allows you to work with other databases, not SQL Server like we're going to use, but other databases. All right. Things like Oracle, MySQL, and there's other ones. And the OLE is object linking and embedding. The DB is database. The ODBC right here is open database connectivity. This allows you to work with non-database things. Things like spreadsheets. All right. So we care about system.data.sql client. And in particular, we care about these 4 commands: SQL connection, SQL command, SQL data reader, SQL data adapter. Virtually every program that we do from here on out, you will have that using line. Either you'll have to manually put that in using system.data.sql client, or if you don't put it in, you're going to get the little squigglies where if you put your light on it, it's going to say, do you want to add this using file? All right. So these are the different .NET providers. They allow you to work directly with a database. All right. Again, we'll need this using directive, and it is possible to work with databases other than SQL Server. Like I said, Oracle, all right, SQL, MySQL. There are probably, there's a good 20 or 30 of them. All right. Now, my guess is you all know, or you both know, who Jeff Bezos is. You know who Jeff Bezos is?
Yeah.
Who is he?
He's the CEO of Amazon.
Right. Do you know who Larry Ellison is?
No.
All right. He's the same thing for the Oracle database company. And Oracle owns not only Oracle, they own MySQL, and a few years ago, they also bought Java. So for many years, Jeff Bezos wasn't the richest man in the world. It was Larry Ellison. But he's done a better job of not being that well known, unlike Bezos. All right. So how do these things work with one another? Well, this is a picture of what they do. You'll be working with data tables, And notice that data tables go to data adapters and get information from data adapters. All right. You're going to go and send information to a data adapter. You will send SQL commands. You will make sure you're connected to the database, which will get information from a server, which will send it back to the connection, which will send it back through the command, which will send it back to the adapter, which will send it back to the data table. And if that sounds a little bit confusing, it's not all that different from what we talked about in the AWD1000 class. And Angie, I know you weren't in that, but when we talked about when you put a URL in and you hit enter and it goes out to a server someplace and the server handles it and it brings you information back. It's the same type of an idea. All right. I'm not going to say any more about it. You can read this stuff yourselves. Again, it's not my intention to confuse you with any of this stuff. All right. What happens when you need a database for the two of you? You will each have your own copy of a database. But in real life, if you're working, for example, at Amazon, let's just say, you're not each going to have your own copy of the database. You're going to be sharing the same copy. So for Amazon, if I want to buy a book and there's only one copy left and I go to buy it, they want to make sure that it's set up so that as soon as I do that and I basically purchased it, someone else can't quick run in there and buy the same book. Why? How can they do that? Because they're sharing the same database. All right. You can run into problems if you've got several people sharing the same database. Because if they want to use it at the same time, you can conceivably run into what are called concurrency problems. All right. And there's 2 or 3 ways you can handle this. Excuse me. But there's 2 or 3 ways you can handle this. The first is you can just hope that nothing happens. So you don't do anything. That's the dumbest way to handle it. All right. The other way is what's called last in wins. So if I go and I change a record in a database and Keegan and I both have the same database open and we both have the same database table open and we both have the same database table record open, and I change something and save, and then he immediately changes it, saves and gets out, my change is lost and it's been overwritten by his. That's what's known as last in wins. That's not good either. So typically what most database systems use when they have multiple users, it's what's called optimistic concurrency. And what that does is it says, okay, Keegan and I, just like I just told you, we're in at the same time. Boom. I just came in and I changed the record. And now I got out. Keegan's still in. He tries to change it. Well, he doesn't have the most up-to-date copy. It doesn't have my information in there. So he tries to make the change and it says change cannot be made now. Try again later. So he has to get out and get back in again. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. And they're showing it pictorially here and they're explaining what happens. But it's basically what I just told you, okay? All right. So when you go in and you create a database and you work with it, you have what's called a data set. It's basically what a database is. It's one or more tables. The tables consist of one or more columns, one or more rows, which can have constraints. And if you've got more than one table, you can have relationships between the tables. That's pretty much what they're saying here. All right. Typically, it says here when you want to work with data from 2 or more tables, you use what's called a data adapter. But it's not, you don't always have to do that. All right. And again, I don't want to get into this because it's too easy to confuse you. And that's the last thing in the world that I want to do right now is to confuse you. All right. So 2 ways to create data objects. We're going to do this kind of thing. eventually. It probably won't be next week. It'll probably be the week after that. And when you look at this, you go, oh, this isn't hard. It's these right here. If we looked over here, this is not a form. This is a database object that's been created for us. And we can come in here and add as many of these things here as we want to. If you look here, it looks like the on-hand quantity is not there. But we can just sit there and say, okay, from here, we can click this arrow, and then we can choose any of these we want. We can put them in any order we want. We can drag them over one at a time, and boom, it'll build this for us. As we're doing this and setting this up, these are the things that get put down on the bottom of the screen. Technically, these things that you see, and hopefully you can see these 5 things down here, they're called invisible controls. And what that means is they never show up in the actual project itself. But we've got the data set, which is basically everything. The binding source, again, I'm giving you real simple definitions, which allows us to bind things together. The adapter, which will allow us to communicate. All right, the adapter manager, which does just that. And what's called the binding navigator. When we run something like this, what's going to happen is it'll show us a whole screen full of product codes, their descriptions, and their prices. We have to write things like this. I wouldn't expect you to understand this. I wouldn't expect this to make any sense to you right now. But eventually, together, this is what we'll write. Okay? All right, and that's it for the chapter. Now, even though it's early, okay, because I want to stop it right here, what I'm going to do is, in just a minute, is it's 10:30. What is it? 10:33, it looks like on my clock. I don't know what yours says. But I'm going to generate a new URL, and I'm going to very quickly come in, and I'm going to just write a little bit of SQL for you. All right. In fact, I might just run some queries just so you can see what happens. We'll be done. I've got 10:40 now. We'll be done sometime around 11:15. So drop off if you would. Come back in 5 more minutes. I'll give you a new URL. Thanks.